Good morning, Grace Church. It's so good to be back. So I've been gone for the last couple of weeks and got to be at both of our other campuses in Cape Coral and Fort Myers Shores. And let me tell you, Grace Church is doing incredible things at all of our campuses. But it's so good to be back here at Central. Can I just share with you two quick glory sightings? We share a lot of things that happen here. Let me share two quick glory sightings that I saw over the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, I was at the Cape campus because they were giving out Bibles to third graders, and I happened to have one of those. So I just got to be dad for the day. But at the 11 o'clock service, there were 10 baptisms, all in one family. From grandpa all the way down to grandkids. Like generations together. And it started with grandpa saying that he had made a decision and he wanted to be baptized and said, does anybody else in the family want to go? And all their kids, all their grandkids, 10 people all baptized together. It's just incredible. And then last week, I was preaching out at our Fort Myers Shores campus. Pastor Sherry's daughter had surgery, and she was taking care of her. And right before the second service started, the entirety, all the women that live at St. Matt's house showed up. Pastor Sherry takes a Bible study out there, and you talk about energy in the room, women that were discovering their recovery and life with Jesus all together, and there's just incredible things happening out there. Too. So it's so good to be back together with all of you. Would you pray with me as we start this morning? Lord, I pray that you would speak through me or in spite of me. Grant that the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts would find acceptance in your sight. God, who is our strength and our Redeemer. For it's in the name of Christ that we pray. Amen. So imagine this with me for just a minute. Out on the open sea, imagine a huge, sturdy ship. They've been sailing through calm waters and stormy seas alike, and the crew's been doing a really good job. They've been navigating all of the waves with confidence, but then out of nowhere, a thick fog rolls in. And suddenly, it doesn't matter if the water is calm or choppy, because they can't see a thing. It's like they're stuck in this white wall of nothingness, and the crew starts to panic. They're peering out, they're squinting into the mist, trying to make out any kind of shape or shadow, but it seems hopeless because there's nothing but fog all around. And just when they're about ready to give up, someone spots a faint light cutting through the gloom. High up on a rocky cliff, there's a lighthouse standing tall and strong. It's shining a bright light, slicing through the fog like a knife through butter. Even though the ship is lost in the fog, the lighthouse keeps shining. It's steady, it's sure, it's a beacon of hope, reminding them that they're not alone in the darkness. It's that way with Jesus. When life gets all foggy and confusing, anybody felt fog and confusion? It's easy then to feel lost and alone. But Jesus is like a lighthouse, steadfast, unwavering, even when everything else seems uncertain. Here's what I want to say as we go into back into this series. When Jesus feels far away, it's not because he's moved. It's because we've drifted off course. No matter how thick the fog gets, Jesus is always there, shining his light, guiding us, cutting through the fog. There have been a lot of times in my life that I felt super close to Jesus, like closer than my own breath. But there are other times that Jesus feels far away, like I'm stuck in fog and I can't see. But remember, like in the story of the ship, Jesus hasn't moved. Due to our flawed faith, we're the ones that drift and distance. And we've been looking in this Flawed Faith series, we've been exploring the journey of one of the original disciples, Peter, and his flawed faith. And today we're going to focus on a moment when Peter distanced himself from Jesus, even denying knowing him. It was a tough moment for both of them, testing their friendship like never before. And Peter's story is really significant because all four accounts of Jesus' life, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they highlight this moment, showing Peter's strengths and flaws as a disciple. And throughout this series, we've been looking at the stages of faith outlined by a couple of professors from Fuller Theological Seminary in a book called The Critical Journey. And this book helps us understand the common experiences of the development of our faith. And as we've done throughout this series, we're going to tell Peter's story using this visual. So let's take a look at these stages of faith. And let's have the end goal in mind. This isn't linear, we don't move through this perfectly, but more or less, these are the stages of faith. The end goal, stage 6, is to be transformed by love. That's what we're after. We're going to be transformed by the love of Jesus. So in this life, to get there is quite an adventure. But if now go all the way back to the start, it begins with a life-changing awareness of God. And we talked about that several weeks ago. That happened for Peter in his hometown of Capernaum, where he worked as a fisherman. A miraculous catch of fish leads Peter to the realization that Jesus was no ordinary rabbi. He falls on his knees and confesses, "I'm a sinner," and Jesus replies with an invitation that he repeats to you and me today. Follow me. There's that life-changing awareness of God. Follow me. And then stage 2 is the life of discipleship. When Peter says yes to that call to follow me, he becomes a disciple, a follower of Jesus. To be a disciple is to be a learner, a student, an apprentice who wants to imitate their master. And in this case, we talked about that with the story of Peter walking on water with Jesus. He said, "Jesus, if it's really you, let me come to you." And he gets out of the boat and he at least makes it a few steps on the water. And we all have these stages in common. We have this life-changing awareness of God, then we say yes to the life of discipleship. So in this stage, if Peter was part of Grace Church, it would look like gathering together on Sunday morning. It would look like saying yes to baptism in partnership, which we have that Sunday coming up. It would look like showing up for Bible study or the monthly breakfast, stuff like that. He would soak in the words and the ways of Jesus. That's discipleship. Stage 3 is an active faith life, the active life. Peter's with Jesus for miracles. He's with Jesus for all of his speaking events. He's with Jesus for one-on-one conversations that shaped his life. And if Peter were a part of Grace Church, that active life would have him a couple of weeks ago, last week, joining us for the Second Chance Job Fair, serving as a volunteer for CR on Monday nights, volunteering with the kitchen crew, serving in the grocery store or the thrift store. Peter would be moving from highlight reel to highlight reel of glory sightings, basking in the love of God and serving God's people. This is the best stage. This is the fun one. It's the active life. But that stage only lasts for so long. For Peter, it ends the night that Jesus is betrayed. That's when Peter hits the wall. Kip taught us about the wall last week and taught us that the wall is when our will conflicts with God's will. I don't want to do this. How did I end up here? This isn't how I planned it. The wall is when our faith hits a rough patch, leaving us shaken and uncertain. It's a time when we have more questions than answers, and we may wonder where God's even at or what he's up to. Why do we face these faith walls even today, 2,000 years after Peter did? It's often triggered by some kind of crisis in life. Pastor Pete Scazzaro describes the experience of the wall this way, and it's a long quote. For most of us, the wall appears through a crisis that turns our world upside down. It comes perhaps through a divorce, a job loss, the death of a close friend or family member, a cancer diagnosis, a disillusioning church experience, a betrayal, a shattered dream, a wayward child, a car accident, an inability to get pregnant, a deep desire to marry that remains unfulfilled, a dryness or loss of joy in our relationship with God. We question ourselves, God, the church. We discover for the first time that our faith does not appear to work. We have more questions than answers as the very foundation of our faith feels like it's on the line. We don't know where God is, what he's doing, where he's going, how he's getting us there, or when this will be over. Anyone ever had a wall experience like that? I don't know why I'm here, but I don't like it. Let's go back to the chart. Many people encounter the wall after a time of initial discipleship and active service. They become aware of God's presence. They say yes to following Jesus in discipleship. They dive into the active life, and then they hit the wall. And here's the heartbreaking part. Pete Scazzaro, in his book that came from, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, says that 85% of Christians, when they hit the wall, they don't make it through. They walk away from the wall. They try to avoid it, and they end up walking away from their faith when times get tough. And that breaks my heart, not only to see people walk away, but it breaks my heart because I understand. I've been there. I've been in those moments where I don't want to do this. My will conflicts with God's will, and I don't want to be here. Peter hit his wall when Jesus asked him to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane. Peter was tired, and he was so tired that he kept falling asleep while Jesus is off praying. It's an epic failure kind of moment. And then in a moment of panic, when they show up to arrest Jesus, Peter whips out his sword and he cuts off a guy's ear when the guards come to arrest Jesus. Jesus has to heal the man and remind Peter not to fight spiritual battles with swords. I think we just sang something about that. But then things get even worse for Peter. Earlier that evening, Jesus had warned him about what was coming. And he uses Peter's given name, Simon. So you know it's serious, right? Like when I was just Larry, things were okay. When my mama would say Larry David, ooh. And when it was Larry David Frank Jr., whew, I don't want to go to that wall. So Jesus is pulling out Peter's given name, Simon, and this is what he says in Luke 22:31-34. Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. But when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. But he replied, Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death. Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. Let's take a moment to unpack this. The first line is this weird kind of haunting warning. Satan has asked to sift you as wheat. What in the world does that mean? It's a tough passage to understand. Jesus, number one, is speaking in the past tense as if some kind of showdown and negotiation or showdown with Satan has already happened. Satan has asked to sift not just Peter, but all of the disciples like wheat. And sifting wheat was a common image of that time in farming. After harvesting, sifting is the process of separating the good grain from the useless chaff. Satan is going to sift you. Satan is going to try to separate the disciples from their faith. It's the wall. What does that mean for Peter, for the rest of the disciples? What's it mean for us today? It means that we're going to face spiritual battles. And Jesus warns us of this because evil is real. We don't like to talk about it. We like to put a bow on everything and pretend like it doesn't exist. There are people now, even in the church, that like to say that the devil isn't real. I kind of believe in the devil because Jesus did. He faced evil in his ministry. We face evil in our lives. But the point is not that evil is real, but the point is not to lose hope. Because Jesus defeated evil when he rose from the dead. Evil's days are numbered. I've read the end of the book. I know how it's going to end. So when Jesus walked out of the tomb, the clock started ticking on Satan's days. So even when you hit your wall and you don't want to be in that place, remember, Jesus has already won the victory. Don't speak loss into your life, speak victory into your life, because when Jesus walked out of the tomb, that countdown clock started until Jesus comes back and destroys the devil, destroys evil once and for all. So Jesus is saying this to Peter not to alarm him, but to alert him. And I think that's helpful for us. Like Peter, we don't need to be alarmed by evil, but alert to it. Jesus now gives Peter a word of assurance ahead of all these trials that are going to come his way in the wall. In verse 32, Jesus says to Peter, you're going to be sifted, but I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. So all this bad stuff's getting ready to happen, but Jesus is calm, cool, and collected. There's no rush. Everything's under control. Jesus is about to face his own death, but he's praying for Peter. That's like having the best backup ever. Peter's faith is about to hit such a rough patch, but it's not going to totally fall apart. Why? Because Jesus has already prayed for him. Even when Peter dozed off during Jesus' tough time, Jesus doesn't give up on Peter. He knows that Peter's going to struggle. He's not surprised by Peter's struggle, so he tells him what to do. When you're ready to stop going your own way, come back. But Peter's too stuck in his own pride to really listen to Jesus. Look at me again with verse 33 and 34. Jesus tells him all this stuff, be alert, but he replied, Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death. You hear the arrogance in that? No, not me, Jesus. I'm going to go with you to the very end. I'm not going to leave you. So Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. Peter's at the wall. His will is in conflict with Jesus' will. He's filled with bravado. Lord, I'm ready to die for you. Tough guy Peter. He's writing checks that he's not able to cash, because a rooster is soon going to be crowing and remind him of Jesus' words and bring him to his senses. And what I want to say this morning is I understand Peter. When it comes to the walls that I've encountered in my life, often my first move wasn't to ask Jesus to pray with me. It was to reach down in my own will and my own power and try to fix things myself. Have you ever been in that place? Things are going wrong for you, and you're going to try to do everything else first, and then eventually you go, well, I've tried everything else. I might as well pray. When Jesus is saying, Peter, you need to pray first. Pray that you don't come into the time of trial, he says in the garden. Peter, I have prayed for you that after you've gone through this, that you'll come back. So when I was getting ready to graduate high school and go to college, I really knew where I wanted to go to school. I wanted to go to this small Bible college named Lincoln Christian College. There's a problem. Lincoln Christian College was really expensive. And there was no way that I didn't make the grades to get any kind of scholarship help with it, and there was no way that I was going to get any financial help. So I tried to figure everything else out that I could. I was going to settle for another college. I didn't really want to go there. I knew I really wanted to go to Lincoln, that God wanted me to go to Lincoln, and looking back on it, I know that God wanted me to go to Lincoln. I did everything else I could, and then finally, at the end of it all, I said, Jesus, if you want me to go to Lincoln Christian, you have to make it happen. When I got home from work that night, there was a message on the answering machine. Yes, answering machine, because we didn't have cell phones yet. And on my parents' answering machine, there was a message from Lincoln Christian College making sure I knew that they had just started a brand new program, that everything, all-inclusive, room, board, books, classes, nobody would pay more than a certain amount. And that certain amount was exactly what we had determined that I could afford. Now, come on. My guilt in it is that's where I should have started in the first place. I tried doing everything else first. So I understand Peter. I relate to Peter. He's trying to do things on his own, and it doesn't work out well for him. So after Jesus is betrayed, he's taken to the home of the high priest for the first of many religious and legal trials that occur throughout the night. And we're going to pick up the story in Luke 22, 54 to 62. Then seizing him, they led him away and took him to the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance. And when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, "This man was with him." But he denied it. "Woman, I don't know him," he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Ugh. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. This is Peter's wall. The rest of the disciples scatter and hide when Jesus is arrested, but not Peter. He goes into full-on spy mode, and he quietly follows behind the whole ordeal. He makes it past security. He tries to hide among the staff and servants of the high priest. And as the charcoal fire burns, Peter draws the attention of one of the servant girls. "Wait a second, I know you. You were with Jesus." "Who, me? I don't know that guy." Another servant joins in. "You're one of them." Now he's being lumped in with the whole group. So not only has he denied knowing Jesus, now he denies being associated with anyone in the group. "I don't know them." This goes on, and Peter gets more and more uncomfortable. It goes on, the text says, for about an hour. Another servant heard Peter's accent. His accent gave him away as Galilean. Remember, Galilee is where it all began for Peter. Jesus called him on the side of the sea in his hometown of Capernaum. "You're Galilean, you have to be one of them." "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." In other Gospels, it says he starts to curse at them. So now he's not only denied knowing Jesus, he's denied knowing any of the other disciples, and now he's denied his own heritage. Cue the rooster. Cue the worst part. Jesus turned and looked straight at Peter. Peter has hit the wall. He's at his rock bottom. He's come to the end of himself. His faith isn't working. He's weak. He's tired. He's worn out. His will has clashed with God's will. He doesn't understand any of this. What's his next move? Unlike Judas, who took his failure as final and was so overwhelmed with guilt that he takes his own life, Peter chooses a different route. Peter chooses instead to open his life to new mercy, new possibilities, new trusts in the power of Jesus. Peter's tears are different than Judas's tears. His tears are the start of a cleansing. When he went out and wept bitterly. When we hit the wall, the next move is a journey inward. Let's take a look at the chart. It takes honesty. It takes courage. It takes tears. But on the other side of the wall, on the other side of the journey inward is new life, mature discipleship. Following Peter's story, let's consider this question as we apply this story to our lives. How do I make the journey inward to mature my faith? As I journey inward, first, I need to reflect on Jesus' face. There's that moment where Jesus and Peter lock eyes. And in that moment, a flood of emotions wash over Peter. He sees in Jesus not only hurt, but also love. It makes me think of a memory from my childhood. I always wanted to cut the grass by myself, and now I would do anything to avoid it. My grandpa finally let me try, but gave me careful instructions to go slow and keep the line straight. Well, I knew better than Grandpa, and I decided to go as fast as absolutely possible. The lines weren't straight. There was big chunks that I had completely missed. And when I stopped, I knew it was bad. I expected Pawpaw to yell at me. But I'll never forget when I stopped, him sitting on the back steps and kindly saying, I think you've done about all you can do. I could tell he was disappointed that I didn't listen, but there was also compassion in that. There was no anger in his eyes, just love. And man, that was almost worse than him screaming at me. Reflecting on Jesus' face is the first step in our journey inward. It's about recognizing that despite our flaws and our failures, Jesus gazes upon us not with judgment, but with unwavering love and compassion. Just as Peter experienced, we too can find solace knowing that even in our weakest moments, even when we deny Jesus, we are seen and we are cherished by our Savior. Reflect in the face of Jesus. But reflection alone isn't enough. Then we have to remember Jesus' promises. Peter, in the midst of his turmoil, recalls the words of his beloved teacher. Jesus had prayed for Peter. He reassured him of his place among the disciples. In our own journey inward, we draw strength from the promises of Christ. We might feel alone in our struggles, but we're ultimately reminded that we walk the path hand in hand with the one who has conquered sin and death. And we also walk it in community. Remember, Jesus told Peter to return to his disciples when he was done being sifted. And I think that's really important to remember in the journey inward. It's a journey inward to understand what's going on with us, but it's not a journey of isolation. That's different. The journey inward is not a journey of isolation. At Grace Church, we don't practice excommunication. We don't kick anyone out for their epic fails, and you shouldn't do it to yourself. When you hit a wall or you fail, don't separate yourself. Grace Church is a hospital for sinners, not a hotel for saints. We're not going to shoot our own wounded here. We're not going to shoot our wounded because we need one another to recover from failure. Peter needed the other disciples to help him through the journey inward. And in the journey inward and healing that has occurred after some of my own epic fails, I've needed friends and trusted people around me so I don't go at it alone. And I needed the wisdom of the church. I need you. You need me. The journey inward requires more, though, than reflection and remembrance. It demands action, a return to following Jesus wholeheartedly. How do I make sure that I grow to maturity as I journey inward? Return to following Jesus. Peter's story begins with a humble confession. I'm a sinner. And in this moment of reckoning, when he goes out and weeps bitterly, he's returning to that humility. Where's the Peter that said, I'd die for you. I'll go to prison for you. There's just tears. In this moment of reckoning, he returns to that humility and he's once again ready to follow the Lord. And you know, in our own lives, it's important that we're real with ourselves. We've got to own up to our mistakes, be willing to keep walking the journey of faith, imperfections and all. And just like Peter, we're bound to trip up along the way. That's part of being human. The beautiful thing, just as Peter found forgiveness and renewal in the arms of Jesus, we can too. It's not about being flawless. It's about keeping on, keeping on. So let's take a page out of Peter's book. Let's take a moment to really think about this whole thing. Think about your wall. Think about the epic fails in your life. And think about the face of Jesus. It's not a face full of judgment, but of love. Hold on to the promises he's made and dive back into following him with everything you've got. Here's our big idea for today. Even when I deny Jesus, he doesn't deny me. Isn't that comforting? Say that with me. Even when I deny Jesus, he doesn't deny me. I think when Peter looked into Jesus' eyes when he denied him, there was discipline and rebuke. But there was so much more. There was love and there was grace. He saw a love that beckoned him to make it through the wall, to take the journey inward and to come out stronger on the other side. And the invitation is true for you today. When we look into the eyes of Jesus, we're beckoned to move to deeper maturity. So there's a short little prayer course that was written about 100 years ago, and I think it applies perfectly as we take this journey. It's called Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus. Some of you know it. Let's make this our prayer today. If you know it, would you sing it with me? Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Now you've got it. Just stand with me and sing it again. So turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. One more time. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Because it's in these inward moments that our faith grows stronger, helping us to weather the storms of life, that all the things that get thrown our way. So let's embrace the journey together, knowing that we're not alone, that our Savior's love is there to guide us every step of the way. When you hit the wall, you move through it by looking full in his face and trusting in him. Would you pray with me? Lord, help us to trust in you when we come to the wall. When we come to those moments that we've come to the end of ourself. Lord, whatever those walls are today in this room, those places where we have epically failed, Jesus, by your beautiful face, would you draw us back? Would you draw us deeper into a maturing faith and a life of discipleship that ultimately transforms us with your love? Jesus, we ask this in your name. Amen. We're gonna sing this closing song about trust, and if you've come to that wall, and you've come to that moment that you're at the end of yourself and you're ready to journey inward with Jesus, the altar is open for you. If you want somebody to pray with you when you're at the altar, just raise a hand and we'll make sure somebody does that. Let's worship together.